Hey everyone, I'm Case Aiken, and I want to talk next about the Ranger for so many reasons. I love an underdog, and it's no secret that people looked on the initial 2014 offerings of the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Ranger as pretty underpowered. So much so that for a time there was an Unearthed Arcana updated version of the whole base class that was used in Adventure League, and that update was broken powerful. But really, by Xanathar's Guide to Everything, the subclasses were doing a lot of work for the underperforming base class, and then Tasha's Cauldron of Everything completely rewrote the rules on them. The 2024 revisions to the Ranger class resemble what we saw in Unearthed Arcana before Tasha's came out. As a result, I'm not surprised at any of the changes that we are seeing. This Ranger as a base class is doing quite well, and there are subclasses that are doing lots of good work too. So I'm pretty happy with the 2024 version in comparison with any iteration of the 2014 version. That said, my usual mantra of never go full Ranger is still in play here. I am frankly flabbergasted at how bad the Ranger capstone is, and would argue is worse than it was before. But I have to tell you that I love Ranger subclasses. Despite a slow start in the 2014 Player's Handbook, from Xanathar's Guide onward, we got some very interesting additions to the base class. Now, in 2024, the PHB presents updates to existing subclasses with no new offerings. So these are the Beastmaster, Fey Wanderer, Gloomstalker, and Hunter, with every major sourcebook having an entry here. Generally, here for it all, but I'm surprised that they didn't add spell lists to the Beastmaster and Hunter. It feels like such a hurdle in game balance. For the record, we house rule in my home games that the Beastmaster and Hunter get an extra spell known of each level of the base Ranger spell list. Keeps the spells known the same, but keeps them restricted instead of the diverse offerings other Ranger subclasses offer. Beastmaster is more or less unchanged from how it was in Tasha's. Animal Spirit that follows a stat block which you control with either an attack or a bonus action. That option to use an attack instead of your bonus action does a lot very subtly for action economy, by the way. It doesn't get bonus spells, which was the style of the time when first created in 2014, but now seems so weird. But that all said, the Beast Spirit is quite good and can provide good damage and possibly some light tanking or scouting. It's an amazing subclass for what it wants to be. Before we talk about the Fey Wanderer, can we stop and appreciate just how goddamn Final Fantasy Red Mage the art for the subclass is? For a generalist like the Fey Wanderer, this is so fitting. For me, the Fey Wanderer is all about the 3rd level ability to apply your wisdom score to charisma skills, letting them act as party face. The later levels give free teleportation and concentration-free summons, which was incredible and unique when the subclass first debuted. It's so incredibly well designed and balanced, a true testament to the design maturation that we saw by Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and fittingly, there's no major differences with the 2024 version. Meanwhile, the Gloomstalker was almost as venerated as the Hunter and Beastmaster as far as core subclass concepts go. It was in an early Unearthed Arcana and included in the short-lived revised Ranger before getting an official appearance in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. The previous Gloomstalker was loved because of its overwhelming strength, so updating the subclass was a tricky proposition. I think they did a good job here of nerfing the critical areas by way of recontextualizing what those abilities are. Things like damage kickers work entirely differently from their previous version, while core subclass features were preserved. I'm here for this update, even if I mourn some of the Gloomstalker builds I never got to run. The changes are the right call, and it's still a strong subclass. Lastly, the Hunter is the one I'm more disappointed by for its lack of bonus spells known. When the 2014 version first appeared in the Player's Handbook, it was the better option compared to the abysmal original Beastmaster, but it was more or less replaced by Xanathar's. The actual abilities the Hunter bestowed have never been bad per se, they just always felt a little light without a list of bonus spells known to flesh out their flavor. The 2024 version attempts to correct this failing of modular design much as it does with the Wildheart/Totem Barbarian. Now the Hunter can freely switch which abilities are active, and that is a great change. I just don't feel like it creates a stronger class, and that missing element is the spells known/prepared element. It just doesn't have a big thing like an animal companion to draw attention. After the 2014 Player's Handbook, much of the rebalancing of the class was done via subclass implementations. Certainly for the entries presented in Xanathar's and Tasha's, that is. Subclass features come online at 3rd, 7th, 11th, and 15th levels. And now let's take a look at what those subclasses that weren't updated to 2024 have to offer, and how they stack up with the ones that were. So the Drake Warden was the last of the Ranger subclasses introduced, released in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. This has always been noted for its resemblance to the Beastmaster in mechanics, but this is obviously Draconic themed. Like the Beastmaster, this one unfortunately gets no bonus spells known, making this the only subclass released after the 2014 Player's Handbook that didn't bolster the base Ranger's magic. I was disappointed at the time and continue to be frustrated with any subclass that lacks additional Ranger spellcasting. Third level, you get a small-sized dragon companion that can infuse ally weapon attacks with elemental energy based on the type of dragon you select when you summon them. You control the dragon with just your bonus action, so it's not quite as flexible as the Beastmaster. The dragon is pretty good and gets better at 7th level when it increases in size to medium, gaining increased damage and becomes able to act as your mount. It also can fly, but not while you ride it. Lastly, at 7th, you also get to share the resistance your dragon possesses. The 11th level feature finally grants your dragon a proper breath weapon. This is a cone effect that does pretty okay damage to an area. While this isn't a ranger who gets additional magic options, this is a ranger who can compete on area of effect damage with full casters, at least to a certain extent. 15th level has your dragon finally grow to large size, allowing you to ride it while flying. It gets tougher and shares with you some of its defense options. So while I wish that the Drake Warden received a spell list, it's still in the same boat with the Beastmaster, and that's okay. Your dragon is good at all levels. It provides some additional options that the Beastmaster doesn't, like a flying mount at higher levels, but the Beastmaster gets more attacks with their pet and thus better DPR. The Drake Warden is completely in line with the 2024 options. So considering that this was pretty much a solid alternate take on the Beastmaster, this continues to be solid in 2024. This is a great Ranger subclass that certainly fulfills an archetype that people were looking for. I was always happy with the overall design and continue to be. Now, from the only one lacking a spell list to arguably the one that is carried by its spell list, we move on to the Horizon Walker, first introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. This probably got the most attention after the Gloomstalker, but the buzz died down as time went on. When it was first introduced, this was the teleporting ranger, with it getting Misty Step on its spell list and class features that allow it to teleport while making attacks. They get a strong spell list with options like haste and the aforementioned Misty Step. Third level included a ribbon feature to detect portals, as well as a damage kicker that they can do at will but costs a bonus action each turn to use. This is kind of like a pseudo-smite ability that provides a d8 damage bonus once per turn. I think the design goal, particularly around when this was released in Xanathar's, was to not completely overshadow the hunter, so damage kickers were all worse than the basically free d8 that hunters get once per turn, so you can really see it on display here. 7th level was a very limited ability to walk through walls by way of an on-your-turn-only etherealness effect. 11th level is where you get a teleportation ability as part of taking the attack action, letting you zip around while fighting and potentially giving you an extra attack. And 15th level gives you an alternate version of Uncanny Dodge, letting you spend your reaction to gain resistance to a single attack's instance of damage. So let's talk about the elephant in the room here. The Fey Wanderer, which was basically a second attempt at doing the same concept. Both are all about adding teleporting to your ranger gameplay loop, but the Fey Wanderer adds more class features. The Horizon Walker has the better spell list, however. Haste can be awesome on a martial class after all, especially combined with the 11th level Distant Strike feature. It still is competitive depending on what you're going for. The updates to 2-weapon fighting certainly helps this subclass, which always suffered when attempting to 2-weapon fight due to Planar Warrior costing a bonus action each turn. If I were updating this, I'd bump up the damage of Planar Warrior to make it truly be an at-will smite ability, maybe like a 1d10. Then the rest of the subclass is doing okay, but would benefit from a few small extra abilities to flesh out an anemic list of subclass features. Nothing huge, maybe just ribbons, but something. Next up, we have the Monster Slayer, which was presented to me as a rethought hunter, and that comparison remains in 2024. This is not a particularly strong subclass, but it does offer a lot of tools to deal with supernatural threats, and does well enough in the 2024 comparison. We're looking at a mostly utility spell list, but a spell list nonetheless. At 3rd level, they get a weaker, free-to-use Hunter's Mark type ability called Slayer's Prey. This does damage only once per turn, but don't cost nothing, and that nothing includes concentration, which means that this ability can stack with Hunter's Mark as well. It just takes 2 turns to set up. They also get Hunter's Senses, which basically is the new ability given to the 2024 Hunter to identify weaknesses, which I feel like backs up my comparison between the two. 7th level is Supernatural Defense, which gives you a bonus of a d6 for all saving throws provoked by the target of your Slayer's Prey, encouraging you to always have the big bad or a caster marked. It also, at the time, provided a d6 bonus for the skill check to escape a grapple, but that's now a saving throw in 2024. 11th level is a weaker version of Counterspell that you can use once per short rest, but when you need it, it's good to have. 15th is a counterattack that you can use when the target of your Slayer's Prey forces a saving throw, potentially negating the roll, which is very nice. So the Giant Slayer isn't flashy, but it does okay in the right circumstances. It has a little bit of a tough time when dealing with hordes, but against a single target, this can really stand out. This is a solid enough subclass, but it's unassuming. It is on the lower end of power relative to all the other Ranger subclasses, however, so that's something to keep in mind. But in my opinion, it does fine. Now, would I pick the revised Hunter over the Monster Slayer? I don't know. I like the changes to the Hunter, so it's probably what I would go with now, but who can say how the metagame will shake out as these two see play. And lastly, we have my other favorite Ranger subclass, the Swarmkeeper. This is a flexible subclass with strong design themes that was introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, alongside my other favorite Ranger subclass, the Fey Wanderer. As the name suggests, starting at 3rd level, you have a swarm of some kind of creature always whirling about you. This can be anything, and you're allowed to flavor it as you see fit. This means it could be bees, bats, rats, fairies, or even nanobots in a more tech-heavy setting. At 3rd level, the swarm bolsters your attacks, letting you do extra damage or moving either you or the target when you make an attack. Great for battlefield control. They learn Mage Hand, which is themed as an extension of your swarm, and a bunch of good spells that work with most swarm themes you roll with, though maybe favoring more insect-themed swarms over otherwise. 7th level is great for limited mobility, gaining a flight speed with a very slow movement speed. Makes me think of the villain from Big Hero 6. 11th level was a moderate damage bump and increased movement options to your 3rd level swarm features. 15th is a damage reducer with a teleportation effect rider. This is a very nice subclass with a lot of flavor options. You can lean into a creepy swarm and be a bug man or, dare I say, Batman, or you can have something like fireflies surround your character and come off like some energy-flinging superhero. I think people read the subclass and think 1 million ants, when it could just be about anything, including a telekinetic powerhouse that happens to represent their power through floating particulates. So as for updates, doesn't really need them. Swarmkeeper is great and definitely fits with the power curve set for 2024. I would happily allow this at any table, no adjustments required. So that's it for the Ranger. I was surprised at how few subclasses they had, full stop, and how good those subclasses were. While the Xanathar's offerings probably could use some love, and the one missing a custom spell list still irk me, it's a great collection still. None of these, nor the 2024 updates to the base class, remove my standing advice of never go full Ranger. But that's the weak capstone, not the rest of the solid frame. I've always had a soft spot for the Ranger, and you can see how hard it is to balance over the various editions. The 3.x Ranger was fairly weak, despite a good frame to build off of. Then Pathfinder updated the class to be a true replacement for the fighter that no one selected. 5e had a similar problem with a weak initial offering that people have failed to reevaluate in the time since. But by the time Tasha's came out, we were looking at a good class with great subclass options. In 2024, nothing has changed, besides the core frame being more holistic in its approach to what a core class feature, Hunter's Mark, is to the Rangers. This is a class that gives a lot. But next time, I want to talk about the other half-caster, so we'll be talking about the Paladin. But until then, just roll with it.